Kazunori Yamauchi was 24. He had just bought his first car on a 5-year loan, a Nissan R32 GT-R. 6 months later, on a public road, he pushed that car to 200 kilometers an hour. Then he crashed it, no insurance, the car was gone. This was the 90s in Tokyo, the age of the Hashiriya, Japan's peak street racing era. Yamauchi was born in 1967 in Chiba. He was a sickly kid. His classmates called him the Sick King. He collected sports car erasers. He collected car magazines. At 3 years old, he could already recognize car logos from the back of his father's car. His father liked to take him into the woods to catch bugs and crayfish. Later, that forest was flattened, turned into a housing development. In high school, he wanted to be a film director. He got into Nihon University Arts, but in his free time, he was a street racer driving a modified Celica XX, hitting mountain roads around Tokyo. Until the GT-R he bought on loan got wrecked. After graduation, he didn't go into film. He went to Sony Music and became a music producer. Why would a record label host a guy who wanted to make games? In 1992, Sony's old guard was strongly opposed to making a game console. Chairman Norio Oga wanted to save the project, so he exiled Ken Kutaragi and his team to Sony Music, a financially independent subsidiary, letting them run on their own budget. That's how the PlayStation survived. In November 1993, Sony Computer Entertainment was officially founded, a joint venture between Sony and Sony Music. Yamauchi was one of the people pulled from the music division into the new company. He later said this, "I was lucky. I happened to be at the center of the PlayStation movement." In 1992, racing games belonged to the arcade. Sega Virtua Racing, Namco Ridge Racer, Sega Daytona USA, 3 companies with custom arcade hardware pushing speeds nobody else could touch. On the PC, Papyrus had just made a racing sim, the first of its kind, but it needed a top-end PC to run. On consoles, simulation racing was a forbidden zone. Some had tried. A project called IMSA was killed right after being greenlit. The industry consensus was clear. Consoles couldn't handle real physics. Against this backdrop, Yamauchi pitched late 1992, a real driving simulator on the PlayStation. No one at Sony believed he could do it, but they gave him $5 million and a small team. Japan's bubble economy had just burst in 1991. But the money burned before it popped had already produced Japan's golden age of sports cars. 1989 saw the R32 GT-R, nicknamed Godzilla. 1990 brought the Honda NSX, tuned personally by Ayrton Senna. 1991 the Mazda RAR X7 FD. 1993 the Toyota Supra A8e. This batch of cars became global legends. At the same time in Japan, Option Magazine, Best Motoring Videos, Hashiriya and Wangan street racing culture was at its peak. GT didn't create that wave. It preserved these cars on a disc before the bubble-era cars lost their value. The development took 5 years. The producer on GT was Shuei Yoshida, later head of Sony's worldwide studios. Yoshida remembers one scene. He walked into the office in the morning and found Yamauchi and his team sleeping under desks. One time, right next to his own head was someone else's leg. Yamauchi described that period himself like a college club room, his own exact words. "For 5 years I woke up at the office, I fell asleep at the office. I only knew winter had come when it got cold. I went home about 4 days a year." Technically, they were beating the PS1 into submission. The PS1 CPU ran at 33 MHz, floating point was basically absent. To run real-time physics, the team had to write it all in assembly. They originally designed 12 cars per race. The PS1 couldn't do it. They cut it to 6. December 23, 1997. Gran Turismo launched in Japan. It sold 10.85 million copies worldwide, the best-selling original game on PlayStation 1. April 3, 1998. Sony spun Yamauchi's team off into a new company called Polyphony. Polyphony in Chinese means many voices. It's a music term, a tribute to their origin inside Sony Music. In 2011, Yamauchi gave a talk at DICE. He said, "When strangers at a restaurant ask what I do, sometimes I answer, I work with light." In 2008, Sony and Nissan launched a project called GT Academy. They took the fastest players in the game and trained them into real racing drivers. There was a British kid named Jan Mardenborough. 17 years old. His family couldn't afford a wheel stand, so he built one himself out of MDF board, plugged it in at home, and played GT. In 2011, he beat 90,000 applicants and won GT Academy. He went on to race at Le Mans 24 Hours, took class podiums, raced in Japan's Super GT, raced Formula E. He became a full professional driver. In 2023, Warner Brothers turned his story into a feature film. The movie is called Gran Turismo. One man was 24, crashed his loan-bought GT-R. The other boy was 17, sitting at home on a wooden rig, playing a game. One of them built this game. The other had his life built by it. In a later interview, Yamauchi said this: 25 years ago, there were all kinds of car magazines. They were making new car fans. Now they're gone. Gran Turismo has become one of the last things still making new car fans. We have a responsibility. That line about working with light isn't a metaphor. It's what the sick little kid who collected erasers grew up to call the one thing he spent his entire life making. Follow for more. See you next time.